Today, our first topic will be how companies can be more inclusive. Now is the time to invest in building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. Successfully building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce gives your company a competitive advantage and enables you to better attract and retain the best talent. We are joined today by some amazing panelists from the S&P Global company, including Emily Jasper, Associate Director of Product Management, Nick Sophinos, Business Process Specialist, and Emma Cusdin, Market Intelligence Director of People. Very specific job. I'd love to hear more about that. So this conversation will be moderated by our very own PowerToFly's Senior Management of DEI, Sienna Brown. Please welcome our speakers and Sienna.
Thank you so much, Hunter, for that lovely introduction, and welcome to all of you, Emily, Emma, as well as Nick. And so what I'm really excited for us to talk about today, and also to introduce to our audience, is a little bit about the amazing work that all of you are doing at S&P Global, and really talking about how can companies be even more inclusive. So Emma, if you could come on video so we can see you if possible, that would be fantastic. And in the meantime, I really want us to kick off this session by learning a little bit more about all of you and S&P Global, right? So Nick, as Vice President of the LGBTQ Employee Resource Group at S&P, what are some of the specific resources available to the LGBTQIA+ community?
Yeah, so we have a lot going on at S&P these days. I know currently Emma and I are on a big push to get out some transgender guidelines to help people who are transitioning and those with people transitioning on their teams know what resources they have, kind of the guidelines and path on everything they can go through and the changes they want to make so that they can choose if they want to make those and see everything they would be able to do ahead of time. Outside of that, we've got a bunch of different things going on right now. We've got a book club coming up at the end of the month, and resources for mental health and counseling and all sorts of different things, really. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I definitely think that what you were talking about around inclusivity, and then also the awareness, the book clubs, having consistent conversations is so important for the individuals of that community, and then also for allies who are also looking to be able to say, how can we support a little bit more as well? And so, Emily, I'd love to pass it over to you because you are also a part of that ERG. And so what are some other ERGs or recognitions by S&P Global that you're proud of?
Thank you so much. I am participating, interestingly, in several adjacent ERGs that I didn't think I would have immediately been a member of, but because we combine a lot of our events and try to bring our whole selves to work. I participate in ParentsNet, which is a group specifically of parents, and I have fur babies, but they actually help me connect them to a nonprofit I work with that helps with housing families. And we have a veterans association that I join periodically because I'm the daughter of a military officer. We have all kinds of other groups, and part of what's amazing about them is that we elevate many of our own employees and their experiences as speakers and part of those programs. And what that also does is it helps highlight additional work. So, you mentioned other recognitions. I was fortunate enough to have a presidential award in the first quarter because of the volunteer work that we coordinated with that group between Spectrum and our parents group, and having the president of the organization recognize that complete volunteer engagement is really wonderful, because it's kind of showing that they walk the walk of not only wanting to encourage that and bringing everybody together, but then recognizing when the good work is done.
I love that. And Emily, it really sounds like it's not only from the bottom up, but also having that top-down support. So really looking at it from a holistic point of view. That's amazing. Then before, Emma, I really want to lean into an article that you wrote, but I just want to remind the audience that we are also here to answer any questions that you might have. So if you're hearing more about anything that Emily or Nick or Emma are sharing and you want to learn more or more about the work that they're doing at S&P Global, definitely please drop it in the chat so that we can answer them live. And so Emma, I'd love to lean in with you a little bit and unpack an article that you wrote in 2017 titled, "It's Not Just About Toilets, How to Make a Trans and Non-Binary Inclusive Workplace." And so in that article, you discussed various issues that the transgender community faces and how it's more than just quote unquote sticking a gender neutral sign on the toilet door, right? So as a relatively newer member at S&P Global, do you think that S&P is going out of their way to ensure that all parts, everything from healthcare to the corporate voice and leadership of diversity and inclusion neatly tied together?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And it's delighted to be here. And as you say, I'm a relative newcomer to S&P Global. I think I've only been here 6 months. And a couple of things I just want to add. One of the reasons for me joining S&P was having an amazing conversation with the LGBTQ plus spectrum lead at S&P Global. As a diverse candidate, you're always wondering what it's going to be like when you get in. And so for me, that was just one of the steps. And it was just such a positive conversation that I thought, actually, this is probably where I want to be. This is my home. And for me, what really struck me since joining and finding out so much more about this amazing organization is just all the work that's happening from senior leadership all the way through the organization. And also that desire to get to do even more. And I think for me, that's really, really important. And coming back to my article, which 2017 seems like a long time ago, and I can actually remember where I was when I wrote the article, a lot of that still holds true. A lot of organizations for LGBTQ plus inclusion do things just which I call sort of nameplating. You put a sign on a toilet, but you're not doing the work that sits behind it. You're not doing the tough stuff that sits behind it. And what I've been really amazed at and super delighted as I've come into S&P is to find there is so much of great work that we've done that's behind this. And I'm sure Nick can talk about some of the great benefit stuff that's happening across the globe. But absolutely, it has to be, I call it, it's DNA. It has to sit within the organizational DNA. And I really feel that every day at S&P in terms of just that we have that truly in our DNA and a real desire to want to keep on improving.
I love that, Emma. I was smiling because that's something that we often see in the work that we do as well, right? So how are we really having DEI be a part of a company's DNA? And it is so important. I love the fact that you also just shared that throughout the process, everything from the interview process to the small interactions that you had really had an insight on you being able to say, well, okay, well, this is somewhere that I want to be. And I just want to highlight that because for anyone who's listening, whether you are someone who is looking for job opportunities or you might be a leader in one of your companies, knowing that while yes, the long-term strategies and big thinking is important, but it's also what do those day-to-day interactions look like, right? How can we be inclusive on the micro level that has a macro impact? And so I would love to talk about this a little bit because I love the concept of, again, like not just sticking a gender neutral sign on a toilet door, right? But actually being able to say, what are we doing fundamentally to support individuals who are a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, right? And so I would love to have one of you share, and I think Emma was saying that, Nick, you could lean into this a little bit more, but what are some of the different parts or benefits that y'all have, like healthcare, the external corporate voice, and leadership that you really want to highlight?
Yeah, so for healthcare, I touched on it a little bit. We definitely do have some really great benefits as far as mental health goes. We also, to go in with our parents net conversation a little bit, we provide reimbursement for adoptions to help with people who either can't have children or would like to adopt. And then for this month, we highlighted a bunch of our Rockstar employees in the LGBTQ community. Emily made that short list of people, and then we have people all over the globe. Looking at this list, it looks like we got some people in Hyderabad and Mexico City, and like I know a lot of these people personally because I interact with them so frequently. Because especially with the pandemic right now, all of our events have become this global online mesh, which is really interesting.
I love that. And I want to lean into this a little bit because I think something that you just mentioned is so important, right? The intentionality of how do we look at this from a global scale and a global point of view, right? Because when we think about representation and we think about inclusivity, that is often dictated by where we are physically. And so I would love to hear a little bit about the work that y'all have done or that y'all have seen of how do we incorporate inclusivity for the LGBTQIA plus and all communities as a whole, but through S&P Global.
I think one of the things that we know when we think about inclusion is the outward view, which especially during Pride ends up being considered almost like pink washing when folks feel like organizations aren't walking the walk. But it is an opportunity actually to then take a look at those moments. And I'm going to use an example from this morning. We got these backgrounds emailed to us last night, and I happened to send them over to my managers because I knew they had a town hall this morning. And I was like, I'm just going to ask and see if they'd want to use them. And lo and behold, they threw them up. And I loved that because it was a simple request. They added the backgrounds to a big town hall. Lots of people saw them. I got a lot of questions of where do they get them? And it was so nice to have my managers be true allies. And so those moments that in the middle of all of the email and all of the virtual events, when you can actually reflect back on something that might be a question or allow someone to join an ERG event and their schedule's not so packed that they can't participate in these company opportunities. We also have a lot when it comes to how do we demonstrate inclusion through our donation and philanthropy programs. We encourage a lot of donation matching and then nomination of organizations to the foundation for dollars. And then at the end of the day, it's also a matter of, I guess to use another phrase, putting your money where your mouth is then supporting our clients and businesses who might also then be led by LGBTQ plus IA leaders, and making sure we've recognized that as more organizations think about what is ESG models, that S part, the social or the governance part, becomes more important to demonstrating how you do good business. And so it's celebrating moments individually on your teams with your managers, but also then creating these wonderful practices through your supply chain, through your purchasing, through your vendor relationships. And I think that's really important for both. And then you can be proud when you have the rainbow logo up because you're doing the work.
Yeah, and can I just build off the back of that, because I think what Emily said there is super powerful. And again, as a new joiner, what really struck me is almost coming into this environment. So our CEO, Doug Peterson, did an amazing podcast. It's well worth checking out on S&P on just all the stakeholders for us in S&P, and really called out all those elements that Emily has talked about. This isn't just about us as an organization and our investor shareholders. We have stakes in so many different places, and we have that real power to involve people. And what also struck me was the foundation work we do at S&P and the giving the dollars away and giving it into the communities that need it the most. And then probably one other thing, just to also share about a little moment. We really encourage our people to write blogs, internal blogs. And I wrote one about International Transgender Day of Visibility at the end of March. With some apprehension, I have to say, as a new joiner, writing a blog about yourself. But what really struck me was from the senior leaders in our organization all the way through, the amount of positive comments and support, and that what people were going to go off the back of that just blew me away. I have to say, I was absolutely outstanding, just absolutely full of hope and admiration about this being a really great place. And for me, a simple act as a senior leader, just to post a comment to say, this is really great, really support you, is a small thing for a senior leader, but I think it makes such a big impact to us within the S&P and people across the organization seeing it. So a couple of things just to share there in terms of just that really positive, inclusive culture and putting the dollars where it matters.
Yeah, I totally agree. I sent out a global email to our entire kind of spectrum chain, and the amount of feedback I got from even just top leadership emailing me to thank me for telling a little bit about my coming out story and all of that. It was great to see. I mean, I probably got 20 something emails from people I don't get a chance to talk to very often. So it was great.
I love that. And Emily, did you want to add anything or share before we move forward?
I would just say, to wrap that up, what Nick just said, where it's that reflection of where with someone you may not see. So we're all virtual now, and in theory, even with a lot of calendar sharing, there is still sometimes that feeling of access to our senior leaders. That open door policy online, when you see someone's indicators red constantly, may not actually feel like it's open door. And when you have these opportunities for someone to become, if they're in the C-suite and they email you back, they're a real person again. They're not just a name. And I think that's really important because it creates that connection and familiarity. And then as folks who are looking to build a career with an organization and potentially move through those then personal connections that they've been able to make, and that making that journey and that path so much better. And I think in a virtual world, it's really important to know that when you share and you bring your whole self, and other leaders then reflect back, or if you are a leader and you saw something, don't just think in your head like that was a really nice post, comment on it or email back, and it makes such a big difference.
I love that. And again, I just really want to acknowledge all of the amazing things that y'all just shared, from the different initiatives, big and small, to just general support. That's something that really should be celebrated. And so before we move on to different questions, I also just want to give space to the audience again to ask any questions that y'all might have. And in addition, we actually got one in to detract and go back to what we were talking about a little bit before, but could y'all elaborate on the stickers, the backgrounds that you're using? Someone said that, Lynn said, this is a really outside the box initiative. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that specifically. And then in addition, how might there be other ways that y'all celebrate Pride, not just during the month of June?
I'm laughing a lot. Nick and I have been on this path. So Nick, I think you should tell folks how we got the backgrounds and what else we're trying to gather.
Yeah, for sure. So we started working on these backgrounds a few months back. Emily and I have been pushing for them a bunch, and we were very excited because they got finished yesterday at like 4 p.m. because we were really worried we weren't going to be able to use them for this, just because it's always tough with large international companies and branding and all of that excitement. But we do things throughout the year. Emma mentioned we had Trans Day of Visibility. We had a big post for that. We're partnering with Lambda Legal at the moment to have some events within our own corporation to have people talk about a lot of these bills getting passed to disallow trans kids from playing sports in high schools, because it's clearly a big deal if a trans child plays sports with someone else on a high school level. I mean, yeah, soapbox, sorry. But we have tons of different learning opportunities. Our book club is actually meeting every 2 months to choose a new book. We have a huge list of different titles that cover gay content, trans content, queer content. We try to make sure we've got some fiction, some historical a little bit of everything so that we get a chance to both learn and experience different people's point of views. And that's just our Spectrum employee resource group. We have 7 others for different communities. And then I'm a member of every single one of them because they all have such great events throughout the year.
I love that. And Nick, something before I give space to y'all, something I really just want to acknowledge and highlight there is the different types of books that y'all include in the book club, which might seem silly, but also something I think is so important of like being able to have fiction stories or real stories where underrepresented individuals are the main characters and the story isn't necessarily about their identity, right? Because it normalizes it a little bit more. And so I love that because history is fantastic, culture is great, but actually being able to read a story about an individual and connect with him on that deeper level. So just wanted to acknowledge that and say cheers to all of y'all. And Emily or Emma, do y'all have anything to add with what we just shared? And also I just want to congrats y'all again on the backgrounds because they're wonderful and I'm glad that they're here in time.
The only other thing I'd add is when I joined, I decided to put my pronouns on the bottom of my email signature. And I think for me, I didn't seek approval. There wasn't a corporate green light. I just said, well, I'm going to do it, and for me, that's been super accepted. And we're seeing more and more people putting pronouns on the bottom of their signatures, of their email signatures. Small things like that are a really great small ally thing to do for you to show and demonstrate your inclusiveness. And we're seeing social media platforms such as LinkedIn now being able to put your pronouns on. So, you'll find me with mine, and just encourage everybody who's listening in. Those small things are huge, and they're really good. They're just talk about inclusion and encourage everybody to do that.
And I will say, I think the reality is if you are working at an organization where it feels like you might have a lot of people you have to ask for anything to happen, obviously check any handbooks and things you might already have. There could be great policies already there that because your handbook was 60 pages, you may not remember that one specific line about pronouns. But I would also say, as you continue to build those relationships, it makes the path a little easier. Nick mentioned that we started the background conversation several months ago, and that's because I used to work at a creative agency and I know how long it takes sometimes just things to happen. If you're in a position to be a bit more nimble, be nimble, take advantage of it because you may not always have that opportunity. And I think when you do that, when you give people a chance to be creative, to express themselves, it's amazing. And when you do it from the organization's perspective, you may not know who else is on a phone call with you who appreciates seeing that. And I think as we are even if we go back to offices, we're all still going to be really virtual. And I think it's important to leverage those opportunities when you have them.
I love that. And I just want to kind of continue this conversation around allyship as well, right? And around quote unquote small things or actions or intentions that individuals can do, because we've been talking a lot about leadership, but I love the fact, Emma, that you were like something very tactical, right? Having pronouns in the bottom of your email and how that could share a sense of inclusivity to people who might not necessarily know S&P Global, but then also internally as well. And so I would love to hear Nick, Emily, and then Emma as well. What are some other small actions that allies can do to show up and support in the workplace?
Yeah, actually, so a few years ago, we did a huge ally launch. We had a couple of videos from our C-suite execs to talk about how they can be a better ally, and we gave out, I'll have to run and grab one in a second. We gave out lanyards and little tent desk cards that actually have like different ways you can be an ally, speaking up when you hear something. Even if you're not a member of that community, like you can still say, hey, like that's not okay. Like, and so we had those lanyards and I absolutely loved it because between the desk cards and the lanyards, I had some of the management in my area who would not necessarily wear the lanyards, but they'd hang them on their door frames. So you had this like bright rainbow lanyard that you could see all over the office and in every section. And when I went to visit London or New York, like it was so great to see that even outside of there, because I'm in Colorado, like most people had a desk card or a lanyard on their desk, and people love them. I think the biggest thing about being an ally is making sure that you're standing up for people whether they're there or not, and you're not letting people talk ill of anyone else if you're around.
I would say, even with the background story, I'm very fortunate. My very small immediate team, three of the four of us identify somewhere on the queer spectrum, and my manager, who might feel a little outnumbered, on the other hand, is always saying, I found this article, or here's something that I saw. Did you watch this movie? Speaking of pop culture, like all of us will consume anything, even if it's not always the greatest. And I think making it part of just the daily conversation of getting to know your employees has made a huge change in oh yeah, look at that rainbow. A huge change in how we interact with each other. And what it does is, instead of putting someone in a box, it's a way to demonstrate who they are. And I think that's so important. And I think it speaks to the larger value of getting to know your employees, being able to understand who they are in the whole, as opposed to just a name or an email address.
Yeah, and I would build off that, which is, we are far more interesting than just one thing. We are human beings, which are just amazing. And to get to know all of you and everything about you is great. Yes, I'm a trans woman, but that's probably the least interesting thing about me. I do many other things. And I think for me, that's the really power of leadership, especially in this virtual world, is having that really empathetic leaders who want to get to know more about a person than just a label. And I think my advice to allies, and maybe it's because I'm English, but I do like a bit of grammar. And ally is about a doing word. It's a verb. So it's about doing something. It's not about just sitting back and going, yeah, I'm an ally. So I think for me, it can be multiple things for allies, but just having a conversation. I'm a huge believer in the power of conversation, especially with people you wouldn't normally be talking to about a subject. And that for me is a very small piece of an ally conversation. And I'm very visual. So I like this idea of, a conversation being a rock that you put in a pool and causes a bit of a ripple. And you never know where that ripple might end up. So absolutely, having conversations, especially when LGBTQI people aren't in the room about LGBTQI issues, I think is super powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. And I completely agree around that and the intentionality behind it. We actually just got a question in from the chat that kind of goes in. And because Emma, something that you were just sharing is, again, being an ally is a verb, right? And the difference between being a performative ally versus an intentional ally, right? Another question, or a question that we just got in the chat is Tom Bailey asked, at another webinar, a speaker said that if you aren't actively including, then you are probably accidentally excluding people. So they were asking, could you discuss how this intentionality applies and perhaps things S&P has done proactively and intentionally? And I know that throughout the conversation, y'all have been sharing a lot of wonderful things that S&P has done, but maybe let's take this question and then also talk about the wide spectrum of the LGBTQIA plus community as well, and really lean into that. And so, Nick, I saw you on mute, so I'll give you space first.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's very easy for people who aren't necessarily involved in certain communities to not intentionally forget, but to forget people if they aren't necessarily involved or aware that those people even exist. Like I identify as non-binary, and there are a lot of people who still don't even know what those words mean, and that's because they just never have had to see that. I know later this month, we actually are working with our disabilities employee resource group, because we're going to do a intersectionality talk on being LGBTQ and having a disability, because a lot of times in our community that gets left to the side. I have fibromyalgia. I've had that for almost a decade now, and that affects my life. Like I deal with that every day, and whether or not you see it, like I still have to live with it. I'll let someone else jump in too.
Go ahead, Emma.
No, go on, Emily. You got there first.
I think I would guess I would call myself a late bloomer. I only came out 2 years ago, and I've been working at S&P for 3 years. So it's one of those funny things that a lot of my colleagues are kind of along for the journey, along for the ride, and it was wonderful in the sense that they already knew me. They knew who I was, they knew what I loved, that I liked to do, that I was chatty, that I helped run the activities committee, things like that. And then this was just another piece of me. And when I think about that and our conversation about getting to know people and bringing the whole person to work, what I think it did was even if my like physical location, I and maybe one other person might identify it that way, we still have a group that is really supportive. And I can't imagine that they had ever necessarily like excluded. I think it was now they have the opportunity to be more proactive about it, and from a site location. And I think that was important, because what it told me is there was actually maybe a need and a desire, but without feeling like they had an appropriate voice or representative, they may have felt a little lost on how to do that. And so sometimes we don't want to always have to be the person who helps lead that in a location or an office or on a team. But if you're willing to, and there was energy to support, then great, because what you might find is there was a lot of interest before that people just hadn't known how to share or engage with. And so I think that would be my reflection.
And I would sort of agree with that. So I'm based just outside of London, and I'm a great believer in what I call nudge theory. You just nudge something along, you give it a bit of a nudge, and you see where it goes. And I think in the UK, our Spectrum team has just been reforming a little bit. So just a couple of conversations, and now we're getting a lot of energy and a lot of interest to come back. So yeah, there's more we can do. And I love the fact that little collective nudge has just created that energy and that desire, and people stepping forward to go, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And I think that's super exciting for an organization. Every organization, I think, is on its journey, and I hate to use that word, but every organization is, and every ally is on their journey. So, not every, there are allies at all levels doing all different types of things, and some are right at the beginning of their allyship and some are further down. But I love the fact that people are taking steps to do more and become even bigger allies, and that real desire to keep on making both S&P more LGBT plus inclusive as a family, but equally thinking about the society impact. So, I'm a activist with a small a, I call it. So my local politician hates me because I'm always writing to him in a personal capacity. What are you doing about this? What's happening here? Why is this happening? And I think for me, that's for me, my personal activism makes me says, actually, let's make this world a better place for the LGBTQI community. But in a corporation such as a great organization like S&P, we have even a greater platform that we can do even more.
That's amazing, and I love that, a greater platform, greater impact. And an even greater impact on the personal and professional level for everyone, also creating a stronger sense of belonging. So thank you all for sharing that. And again, I just want to continuously let all of y'all know who are listening in right now. We are with Nick, Emma, and Emily from S&P Global, if you happen to come in late. And what we are talking about today in this chat is how companies can be more inclusive, with S&P Global partnering with companies to advance LGBTQIA+ equality. And so I've been loving this conversation so much so far, learning a ton about all of you, about all of the amazing initiatives at S&P, et cetera. I want to give the audience another opportunity to add or ask any questions that they might have for all of you. And I want to shift a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about S&P. And I know that we've been talking so much about how great the company culture is, and I know that individuals and maybe even people who are watching this chat right now are looking for companies where they feel like they can really belong. And so I would love to hear from you all from a wider scale. Why do you feel like S&P Global is able to retain the best talent, right? And what can companies do to create that culture for people to truly be themselves, show up as their authentic selves, even from the application process?
Yeah, I think S&P does a great job with our employee resource groups of making sure everyone feels included, making sure that people can talk to anyone across the company. Emily mentioned a little earlier that a lot of our executives are pretty reachable, which I don't think happens a lot in a ton of companies anymore. It's just really great. I know, having been on the board of our Spectrum resource group, like I have interactions with our C-suite at least once a quarter, if not monthly, probably even more. And I'm just not thinking about it right now. As far as what other companies can do, I mean, a lot of it to me, when you're looking for work outside at a company and you want to see if they're inclusive, check out more than just their diversity page. A lot of times your diversity page will have a bunch of people of color, maybe a gay couple, and then you'll go to like the last 3 videos they made, and it's all just like white able-bodied people who are talking up the company, and like, this is great, but I want to see diversity across your company, not just at the one place where you're thinking about it. I know LinkedIn and Twitter actually pay their employee resource group leaders around like $10K a year, I think, which is a huge bonus. I know a lot of us put in a lot of work, and it's really interesting to see other companies doing that. One of the local companies near me, Empower, actually has the percentage of male, female, and non-binary individuals listed for their company. And just little stuff like that where you say, hey, this is something we're looking at and aware of, and we're proud of it enough to the fact that we're actually going to list it so that you know we're also looking at it. Because a lot of companies have these metrics in the background, but it's nice to see it public facing.
I would agree, and I think it's those signals and signs when you're job hunting to see, actually, can I get behind some of the corporate websites? You know, what am I seeing? And as a trans woman, finding a new job, it can be quite daunting and quite stressful, because you're wondering, actually, is it going to be okay? And so doing that research, finding behind it, talking to people who work at the company, getting a sense of actually what does this look like, was really helpful for me. So absolutely, there's small signals and signs, even all the way through to the application process. You know, be able to put your pronouns into the application process was a really great thing for me to be able to do in S&P, and make that step. And you know, it was just a really good experience. And when, you know, as a candidate asking the question, I'm a trans woman, how will I be accepted? You know, without hesitation, really positive inclusion messages coming out and support. Because for me, as a candidate, you're testing the organization to say, actually, how's my response going to be? And that was really great. So I think it's those signals that you actually go, this is really good. This is actually giving me such a positive message. And when we come to sort of belonging, I always think of belonging as almost coming home. So, do you feel you can be truly yourself, almost without any filters, and bring your very best to the organization? And I very much feel that at S&P.
When I think about talent management, there's not just the recruiting of new people, but it's the promoting and supporting development of existing people. And interestingly, I would consider myself perhaps a little bit of a stereotypical millennial because I've worked at like 8 organizations, all for different reasons. But what was wonderful is actually now being at S&P, I was in a position where we were going to have a development conversation looking at paths to promotion. And we have a series happening right now globally called Courageous Conversations. And they bring in these speakers that are kind of in a no holds barred, very candid conversations about some tough subjects. And then we offer people roundtables for reflecting afterwards. And I decided to take that model and host my own Courageous Conversation with my manager as part of my development discussion. And I brought up, my role in this community, and that I wanted it to be actually considered as part of my professional life, that the role I play with the ERGs, but also in volunteering, but then as a member of I would consider myself, a member of the lesbian community, but a member of the larger community, ended up not everyone's always going to be comfortable to have that in a professional development moment. But what it did was, when your boss then is having to fill in all of these scores and write up summaries, and even though they know you, they've worked with you, there is something about having connected on that level that helps make them also want to refer you, hopefully for promotion or potentially another role in the organization. And I think that talent management piece doesn't end once you're in the door. It's part of the longer term relationship you have with the organization. And because of that, he then also went back and looked at some of our benefits and things like that to have just a bit more knowledge. As Nick was mentioning, we offer some reimbursement on adoption. We have different depending on your country, how does your partner fit into your health care benefits or financial ones. And I think him even just brushing back up on that ended up being wonderful, because you never know when a manager might have seen something or been in a different session and say, hey, did you know this is available to you? And I think that's important when we think about promoting and developing talent.
Absolutely, and also that access to opportunity as well. And so something that I just also want to acknowledge is I love that you were sharing the concept of courageous conversations. It's actually something that we've been doing in creating that safe and intimate space to be able to ask the hard questions. And even if you don't feel comfortable in the moment, sending in some pre-submitted questions and really being able to have someone with lived experience really be able to share definitely helps. And I just want to quickly shout out Mariano just said in the chat, as a member of S&P Global and the Spectrum ERG based in Buenos Aires, I would like to congratulate my colleagues on all of their inspiring initiatives, which we share and adapt at the local level. And so again, just talking about the impact that we had mentioned before, being able to see how conversations like these, how the work that y'all are currently doing at S&P Global are really helping or having an impact on a global as well as local level. So we got one more question, and we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to ask another question that's coming from the audience. Again, for those of you who are watching, if you have any questions at all for Emma, Nick, or Emily, definitely please feel free to drop them in the chat. And we got a question in from Glenn that said, what corporate policy or program, in your opinion, has had the biggest impact on elevating alliance among your colleagues and educating allies? And so, again, I know that we've spoken about a lot of different initiatives, but for you all, what do you feel like has had the biggest impact, either on the company as a whole in the company as a whole or in your personal life as well?
All right, I'm gonna steal a big one, and you guys can struggle after that. So I think for me, with BLM and everything going on last year, that's actually when Courageous Conversations started. We had speakers in at least once a month to talk about just Black history, all sorts of different topics, and it's been so interesting to see. Like we've done a bunch of different public things as well, but just having all of those people in, probably I think it was at least once a month, if not more often, and having all of our exec team openly talking about what was going on in the U.S. And actively addressing things that I feel like a lot of my friends in other companies weren't necessarily seeing their companies doing. A lot of people were just kind of trying to avoid it, especially with a lot of people not going into offices. It wasn't as prominent on everyone's radars, and that to me has been so amazing to see, just our response to having all of these conversations, and the fact that we've continued them and kept them up and are now expanding them to other areas of interest and other groups has been just really great to see.
Thank you, Nick, for grabbing the big one. So I appreciate that. And I suppose to build on that, they have been so powerful. And I love this concept that I have in my head, which is about positive curiosity. My experience is not the same as other people's experience, but I want to come and learn, and I want to be positively curious to understand different viewpoints and the different lenses people have. So the courageous conversations that we've been running across S&P has led me actually to go on my own personal learning journey for racial equity, and with a UK context. And it's made me really confront some of the challenges that I never knew about, and has gone me deeper into that journey, and to really confront some of the colonial history that sits in the UK that we don't talk about. And so all of those things have really, really had a very profound impact on me of my personal journey. And my journey in that is still very, very at its infancy, but it's been a huge impact. So I would absolutely, for S&P to consistently have very challenging conversations so publicly across S&P with the executive team, and just watching some of those conversations, they're really uncomfortable, but I love being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so all those things mean that we go on our learning journey.
I would agree. So Nick mentioned one of the benefits that we have related to some adoption assistance, but we also then have some different flavors of that depending obviously on your region and country, but also related to maternity care and fertility programs, and then childcare, and actually a growing support for adult and elder care. And I think COVID taught us that we're not invincible, and that it takes a lot to do things, whether it is to start a family or to care for your family. And we we get these emails called people 2.0, people 3.0, like these versions of the changes of these programs. So one, it's really exciting to see the changes when you come see that email pop up, you're like, ooh, what is new? And there's always something new, which is amazing because it shows that the policies are changing and evolving all the time. You don't want to be working off of a benefits policy that's 20 years old. Like, the world is dramatically different. But knowing there's those tools, and that some of those challenges are not just mine, meaning there are plenty of women experiencing fertility challenges. There are a lot of people having to care for a parent. There are a lot of people looking to grow their family through adoption. Again, it's not just me. Even though I love to be the center of attention sometimes, it's not just me. I'm not in this alone. And I think by creating these policies that are actually serving multiple groups of people in different scenarios, it just, again, it's that little bit of that putting your money where your mouth is, by having those available, and hopefully people use them because we don't want to lose them. It makes me know I can plan for the next few years. Even when we know things you can't happen unexpectedly, I can plan for the next few years because I know I have these benefits available to me if I'm still hopefully at S&P. But like that makes such a huge difference in thinking about what life could be like. And then as you make career changes or location changes or things like that, I think that's just, it's so reassuring. And then you have energy to handle all the other unreassuring things.
And I love the fact Emily calls out the people initiatives. So thank you. That's super brilliant for us being in the people team. But the other thing, just I suppose to take us into COVID, just been blown away by S&P's response to COVID. It has been truly exceptional. And to helping our colleagues in India over the last wave has just been awe-inspiring. Both the support for our colleagues in India, the support offered to their family and friends, and the support offered to previous colleagues of S&P Global who've moved on to other things but can still take advantage of those amazing things we're offering, has been just humanity at its best.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I know we, in the last few months with the newest spike in India, we actually sent out a bunch of new matching entities for donating funds to India. S&P offered to match a bunch of those different nonprofits so that we could continue to donate and knew where we could go to make sure that our money was going to the right place.
That's amazing. No, these are all really great initiatives to really hear and tap into. And so I know that we are getting ready to round up. And so I just want to pose one last question to the three of you, Emily, Nick, and Emma. And what I would love to ask is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners? So hold on, there's a little bit more there, right? So what is one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners if they might identify and be a part of the LGBTQIA+ community and are looking to find a workplace where they feel like they can truly belong? And actually, we'll keep it there. We'll keep it there and we'll make that question simple. We won't complicate it anymore. So what's a piece of advice that you would give to them, or something that you wish you would have known?
Yeah, I know for me, back a while ago now in undergrad, I was always concerned about whether or not I wanted to put my volunteering for queer entities on my resume, and now my involvement with our Spectrum chapter. For a while, I was wondering about it because I am someone who can pass in certain situations. And at work, I was always trying to figure out whether I want to do that. I had some career counselors suggest that maybe I should try. And after a while, I kind of just realized that putting all of that stuff on my resume, making sure that it was visible, asking those questions in the interview is so much more important to me, because the last thing I want to do is pass my way through an interview and end up in a company where they just don't support me. They have no interest in supporting me as who I am, and they just aren't interested in it and don't want me there. I love having all of that stuff on my resume now because it filters out companies that I don't want to work for. It took me a while to get there and understand that, but I won't ever take any of that stuff off. I think if anyone can't see that that all makes me a better, more whole person, then that's on them, and I can find work elsewhere if I need to.
I would say be yourself, and you may not know exactly who you are. Like I said, I was late to the party, and wish someone had told me. But now that I know, I'm so excited, and I bring that, and I maybe a little bit extra about it, but I bring it because that's who I am. And even if even earlier, I threw the background up on all my meetings, and if even for a moment I was like, I wonder, should I? And I was like, yes, you should. And that because that's who I am. And so if even if you're still figuring it out, what you know of yourself and who you are, bring that, and don't be bashful.
And I love what Emily's just said. It feels like we're very connected. I love the Oscar Wilde quote, "To be yourself because everybody else is taken." You have no choice but to be yourself. And I think finding an organization where you can truly be yourself is my one piece of advice. Do the research, speak to people in the organization, get behind what's on the website, look within the community. And I love the fact that at S&P, the S Spectrum team is so welcoming, and it's so very much focused. And I feel like I've been really welcomed and accepted almost into a family. So I think for me, it's around, find the place that makes you happy, where you can be yourself. And if it's not where you end up, go and find somewhere else. And it's very easy for me to say, but I know, and that's a struggle. But ultimately, work is so important. Find somewhere where you can truly be yourself and flourish and thrive and be the best you can be.
Well, I hope that y'all were taking notes. I was like, I have a lot of new things that I want to be putting on post-its as reminders. And I just want to thank all of you, Emily, Emma, and Nick, for sharing your time, your wisdom, your experience, and your expertise with everyone who's watching today. And so we really just want to acknowledge all of you, and also the amazing work that's happening at S&P Global, because it's been amazing hearing all the phenomenal initiatives that are happening on a consistent basis. So thank you to all of you, and we will be dropping all of y'all's information and where people can really reach out and also connect with S&P Global in the chat. And so with that, I'm going to be bringing Hunter back. And I just want to say thank you to all of you again for being a part of our summit.
Thanks for having us.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Oh my gosh. When Emma said, I want to be positively curious about other people's experiences, goosebumps, words to live by. Thank you. Because that's talking about being vulnerable in the workplace and in life. So thank you for that. Okay, folks, we got a lot ahead of us. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. I hope you stick around and watch some of the speakers coming up, because we got some good ones.